My name is Natalie Monroe. For 12 years, I never missed a single Sunday dinner with my family. Whether the snow was thick or work was piling up, I always showed up. With Dad's favorite beef stew and a heart that believed, love means being present. But that day, just as I stepped onto the porch, I heard my brother's voice whispering behind the door. She won't suspect a thing. Last time, we moved 80,000 without her asking a word. I froze, still holding the tray of hot stew, but my heart turned ice cold. If one day you discover that the people you love most have been quietly taking advantage of you, what would you do? Leave a comment if you've ever sacrificed for your family and received nothing but disregard in return. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to follow my journey as I faced that brutal truth and the final decision that brought my entire family down. The story begins with a door left slightly open. I stood frozen on the porch, still holding the tray of stew, while a rush of old memories came flooding back like a waterfall. I remembered the first time I helped James. That year, he had just started his own business, a small real estate company called Monroe Estates, with a self-made sign and a website built by a college student. James called me close to midnight, his voice low and shaky. "Natalie, I know I hate asking for help, but I'm in a bit of a cash flow crisis. If I can't pull together 40,000 this week, the Quincy project will get shut down. I need you to trust me." I didn't even think. The next morning, I wired the money. No written agreement, no demand for repayment. In my mind, that's what a big sister should do, and I was proud I could help. "I'll pay back every cent, soon," James said. And he never did. I still remember my mom, Linda, crying all afternoon when the doctor found a benign tumor that needed surgery. "We don't have enough insurance," she said, clutching a wrinkled napkin. "The hospital requires a deposit of over 20,000. I don't want to be a burden." I hugged her and whispered, "I've got it, Mom. Don't worry." The next day, I transferred 22,500 to my dad. I never asked about that money again. Mom said, "Thank you, I'll never forget," but I didn't need gratitude. I thought, when people truly care for each other, they don't keep track. Then came the year James's company restructured. Once again, I got an email from his personal account with a PowerPoint presentation over 30 slides long, explaining why, if I could temporarily lend 75,000, he'd have a chance to sign a deal with an investor in Texas. I didn't finish reading. I just called and asked, "How much do you need to save your reputation?" James paused for a few seconds, then quietly said, 50,000 should be enough. I sold part of my personal investment portfolio to gather the amount. I did that on my 34th birthday. They never held a birthday party for me. Not once since I went to college. The parties I joined were always for nieces' birthdays, cousins' weddings, or mom's retirement. The only time I was mentioned at a family celebration was when I threw an MBA graduation party and paid out of pocket to treat everyone at a fancy Italian restaurant. I still remember Dad's look when he saw the bill. "Natalie, you sure know how to live fancy." Back then, I thought he was proud. I was always the one who remembered the grandparents' memorial dates. I made family scrapbooks, sent handwritten holiday cards, picked birthday cards for every single person, even personalized ones for each child. I was the one who brought the stew to every event, who spent hours doing Mom's taxes, who fixed Dad's credit card mess, who booked his annual checkup when he was nearing 70. I did all those little things in silence, because I believed that's what children are supposed to do. I just never imagined they didn't see that as love. They only saw it as a resource to be tapped. I vividly remember the one time I said no. That was about 3 years ago, when I was in the middle of a very stressful company restructuring. James called, saying he needed a small amount to rent a new office after a sudden contract cancellation. I said, "I really don't have the extra funds right now, James. Let me revisit this after the quarter." He paused a few seconds, then gave a light laugh. "Oh, no worries. I get it." I just thought you always said family comes first. That sentence. Gentle, but sharp enough to keep me tossing all night. And 2 weeks later, I sent the money. I didn't realize when everything I did, every dollar I gave, every time I said, okay, I've got it, had become recorded as something reusable for later. I thought I was the one holding this home together. Turns out I was just the invisible glue, used for as long as I could stick and easily replaced when no longer useful. And then tonight, as I stood outside the house I once called home, I realized maybe for a long time now, I'd never actually been waited for behind that door. I walked into the house as if I hadn't heard a thing on the porch. The smell of grilled meat mixed with the hot sauce from the tray of stew I'd brought, blending into a scent that once felt familiar. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, his shirt wrinkled but still trying to smile as he saw me enter. My mother hurried over to take the dish, still with that familiar eagerness. You brought it. This one's your dad's favorite. James sat diagonally across the table, wearing a dark polo, holding a beer. He raised his glass slightly at me. Right on time. We were all waiting on you to start. I gave a small smile, as if nothing was wrong. I knew how to perform. I'd been doing it for years. I placed the dish on the table, then took my usual seat, left of Mom, across from James. Dinner started with small talk about the neighbors, a grandchild learning to draw, the kitchen roof that might be leaking. I nodded, smiled, took small bites just like always. No one mentioned what I'd overheard, not a single awkward glance. They were good at this. It wasn't until dessert, Mom's warm apple pie, that the air subtly shifted. She placed the plate on the table and spoke softly. Honey, there's something your father and I want to talk to you about, and it's not easy. I set my fork down and looked at her with the practiced expression I'd perfected over the years. Just enough concern, just enough openness. What is it, Mom? She turned to my dad. He gave a soft cough, his thin hand stroking his jaw as if choosing his words. I've just been diagnosed with a heart condition, narrowed coronary arteries. Surgery is needed soon. The doctor said waiting could be dangerous. I nodded, staying silent. Mom continued. Your dad's insurance only covers part of it, and the hospital is asking for a deposit. Nearly $50,000. Her eyes hesitated on mine. We don't want to trouble you, but if you could help cover it up front. I pretended to be caught off guard, then gently asked, what exactly is the surgery? Do you have the medical documents? I'd like to review them and see if there are other options. James immediately interrupted. You don't believe us? You think we'd make up Dad's illness? I tilted my head and smiled slightly. I work in finance, James. Every wire transfer I make requires documentation. You know that. Mom quickly stepped in, patting my hand. It's okay, I understand. I have the hospital files scanned on my computer. I'll send them to you. Please do. I'll take a look tonight. That night, when I got back to my apartment, I opened Mom's email. The attached file was a JPEG image. An advance invoice from Beth Israel Hospital in Boston. I zoomed in. The upper left corner was blurry, as if it had been cropped and pasted. A line of numbers typed out of alignment with the rest of the text. And the doctor's signature. I recognized it. I had met that doctor before, at a seminar our company sponsored. I projected the invoice onto my big screen, used the PDF software I always used at work to compare it with the hospital's official templates. It didn't match. The date line used a different font, and grade 4 coronary artery wasn't a clinical term. The hospital wouldn't label it that way. I checked the file's metadata. Last modified 2 days ago. Software used? Microsoft Paint. I sat motionless for a long time, my eyes fixed on the screen. What I felt wasn't anger. It ran deeper than that. They thought I was stupid enough not to notice. They thought, if they used Dad's illness as a cover, I'd open my wallet again. Just like every other time. I picked up my phone and looked at Mom's message. She had just sent another line. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll tell your dad to rest a few more days, hoping everything goes smoothly." I typed back, very slowly. "I have a Monday meeting tomorrow. I'll think it over and get back to you soon." I put the phone down and turned off the kitchen light. Darkness filled the apartment, but maybe it felt better than the artificial glow around the dinner table tonight. I never thought I'd live to see the day I'd have to verify a mother's love using image editing detection software. But that day came, and it was clearer than any dinner I'd ever sat through. I stayed up until nearly 3 a.m. that night, sitting alone in the living room with my laptop open and the desk lamp casting a yellow glow over messy stacks of paper. Not because I wasn't sleepy, but because I knew if I went to sleep now, I'd dream of my parents again, and this time, they wouldn't be holding me. They'd be counting every dollar I ever sent, like it was an underperforming investment. I started with emails. I typed into the search bar, wire transfer, short-term loan, can you send, urgent help from Mom, James needs to move funds, and dozens of other keywords. The results were so long, I had to filter them by year. I carefully saved each email into a separate folder, clearly labeled James _2017 _35K, Linda _2020 medical bill, Dad _anniversary, dinner _2019. Then came the messages. I connected my phone to my computer and used software to extract the entire chat history with Mom, Dad, and James. Each thread looked warm on the surface, full of heart emojis and familiar thank you phrases. But now, looking back, I saw a pattern in the rhythm. Pleading, plus sweet-talking, praising, and silence once the favor was done. I had no idea how long I'd been living in that dynamic without seeing it. Their affection, without my money attached, rarely lasted more than a few lines. Around 7 a.m., I sat frozen in front of the Excel spreadsheet I had just built. Column A listed the transfer dates, column B the recipients' names, column C the amounts, and column D the stated reasons in their words. I typed slowly, like each keystroke wasn't coming from memory but being pulled from my chest. A total of more than $186,000 over 7 years. No contract, no repayment terms, no receipts. Just me. And blind faith. I sent that file to a backup email account, a Gmail I created back in grad school, never once linked to my family name. Then I compressed all the files into a password-protected archive, a short, very personal word, one I'd never said to them: boundary. That afternoon, I texted Rebecca Langley, a former senior colleague who mentored me when I first joined the firm. We met at a cafe in Cambridge with wooden tables and soft golden light like late sunlight. Rebecca hadn't changed, her ash blonde hair still neatly tied back, reading glasses hanging from her neck, her voice calm, like nothing in the world could ever rattle her. I sat down without small talk. I need advice and, maybe, some clarity I currently don't have. She set her cappuccino down, eyes fixed on me. "Go ahead, Natalie." I told her everything. The fake invoice, the old money, the recent email from Mom labeled urgent, and even the voice recording I secretly saved from the conversation they didn't know I heard. Rebecca sat still the whole time, only nodding gently at key moments. When I finished, she was silent for a few seconds, then said, very softly, "You think this is a one-time betrayal?" I looked at her, confused. "No, Natalie, this is a pattern, a system, a repeated loop. What do you think I should do?" She leaned in, and her eyes lost their softness. "Cut yourself out, whether it takes scissors, an axe, or fire. You're drowning in a deliberate spiral, and if you don't get out, you'll lose yourself." I didn't reply right away. But that sentence, scissors, axe, or fire, kept replaying in my head the whole train ride home. That night, I began to act. I opened a private fund at an online bank. one no one else knew about. I transferred all my savings, investments, and even my IRA retirement account into it. I left only a small amount in the old bank, just enough to maintain daily transactions so they wouldn't notice. It went into every account: banking, email, money transfer apps, investment apps, life insurance, even medical portals, and changed all passwords. I activated two-factor authentication, registered a security key, and revoked all access I had once granted Mom to help manage the family's finances. I also removed my mother's co-owner status from our joint savings account, something I had added for peace of mind. It took me nearly 3 nights to finish everything. Each time I completed a task, I marked it in red on a printed checklist, feeling like I was sealing off a leaking room before the water flooded in and took everything away. I didn't plan to dig further, truly. After securing my assets, closing the old doors, and rebuilding my boundaries, I just wanted peace. But then a call from my old bank, the one where I had that joint account with Mom, stopped me. "Apologies, Ms. Monroe," the agent said. "We need to verify the request to reissue a secured loan using the real estate under the name Natalie Monroe. Submitted by Monroe Estates." I almost choked. I didn't apply for any loan. There was silence on the other end. Then he said cautiously, "Then it may be a mix-up. The loan was approved 3 months ago. The file includes documentation bearing your signature. If you weren't involved, I suggest coming to the branch to verify in person." 3 months ago, around the time James said he had cleared all past debts and just needed a little operating capital. I went to the bank the next morning. I brought my tablet, a small notebook, and a tight feeling in my chest. The branch manager, a middle-aged woman named Joanne, led me into a private room. On the table was a printed loan package, an application for $120,000. Secured against linked personal assets, specifically the apartment in my name and part of my stock portfolio. "This is your signature, correct?" Joanne asked, turning the copy toward me. I looked at the paper. Signed in blue ink. The handwriting wasn't bad, but there was a fundamental flaw. I always crossed my T with a long horizontal stroke. This signature was short and angled, exactly how my father signs. "No, this is forged. I never signed this document." "I understand. In that case, we'll have to initiate an internal fraud investigation, but I'm afraid—" I exhaled and finished her sentence for her. "They'll never let me have money. The funds have already been dispersed, haven't they?" "Yes." 2 weeks after approval. I sat in silence. It felt like someone had just sucked the air out of the room. "Who's listed as the submitting representative?" Joanne checked the file. "James Monroe, with identity verified by the guarantor, Mr. Richard Monroe." My father. He was the one who signed the witness to signature section. In my head, it was like a crack splitting wider. The same crack that had formed the night I stood on that porch. Now fully ruptured. No doubt left to patch it. They didn't just take my money, they gambled with my name, my credibility, and most of all, the last bit of trust I had left for them. I walked out of the bank in such heavy silence it felt like the morning breeze had lost its coolness. Everything felt heavier now, even the sunlight. That night, I went through the family's financial documents I had stored, mostly tax files and investment records. James once asked me to review for peace of mind. I remembered he had sent me a PDF file, asking me to take a quick look at some confusing sale contract terms. I hadn't suspected anything at the time. I skimmed through it quickly, suggested a few edits, and sent it back. Now, I opened every single page again, compared every number. I used document comparison software and discovered James had previously altered the contract between his client and his company, changed payment terms, and worse, inserted unauthorized electronic signatures. I even found an email thread between James and a client in which the client requested an explanation for why the collateral had an unexpected $20,000 lien applied. James replied bluntly, "System error, handled. Don't worry." It wasn't a system error. It was a calculated act. I dug further, and through a contact who worked at a real estate law firm, I found out James had been under investigation last year for forging legal paperwork, specifically ownership transfer documents in a major land deal in northern Maine. But the case never made it to court. I asked, "Why was it dropped midway?" He answered briefly, "Family interference. Sounds like your father privately paid off the other side. The complaint was withdrawn. One generation covering for the next. And me. The one in the middle, serving as the wallet, the shield, the sacrificial pawn." I sat in my apartment, once again facing open folders on the table. Each page felt like a slow stab. No blood, but unforgettable. I still kept the old family photo frame. Me in a green dress at the center, parents on either side, James with his arm draped over my shoulder. Someone once said the photo looked like an insurance commercial. I looked at it one last time, then placed it face down. I was sleeping when my phone buzzed 3 times in a row. The clock read 2:43 a.m. The fatigue hadn't faded, but my heart was already pounding. Late-night calls rarely bring good news. On the screen was my mother's name. Mom, home. I didn't pick up right away. I sat up in the dark, let the ringtone run its course, then quietly turned on the bedside lamp. Not even a minute later, the phone rang again. This time it was James. I hit silent, but deep down I already sensed. What I had been preparing for these past few weeks had finally arrived. 1 minute later, the third call came in. The caller was my father. So rare that I stared at the screen longer than usual. My father rarely called directly. If he needed something, he usually asked Mom to pass the message. Seeing his name on the screen felt like a clear sign that the storm had truly arrived. I answered but said nothing. "You picked up." His voice was hoarse and urgent. "The IRS? They came to the office this morning with a warrant. They're investigating James. They want to see the books, the contracts, even the old bank accounts. Is there anything you can do to help?" His voice softened. "Just a bit of advice, a point of contact. You work in finance." I took a deep breath. "You called me at almost 3 in the morning for financial advice?" "This is serious, Natalie. Our family is under scrutiny. If the media catches wind of this, James's company will collapse instantly. Seems like the natural outcome after someone forges signatures and uses another person's name to take out a loan. Don't you think, Dad?" He went quiet for a few seconds, then changed tone. "I know mistakes were made, but this isn't the time to argue about right and wrong. It's the time for family to stand together. We can't let outsiders find out. I'm no longer the person you can lean on whenever everything falls apart. That's over." A heavy sigh came from the other end. "You're still upset about the hospital papers, aren't you? That was your mother's idea, not mine. And James? He's just foolish. He's your brother, Natalie. Foolish enough to forge my signature to borrow $120,000? Foolish enough to be investigated for defrauding clients while our parents silently paid to bury the truth? How much foolishness does it take before it finally stops?" My father's voice started to tremble. "You're talking like you're not even part of this family. You think you're better than us." I looked around my familiar apartment, the one I'd bought, renovated, every corner shaped by my own hands, every dollar earned myself, and I understood more clearly than ever. I wasn't better. I was tired. No, I think I let myself be used for too long without saying a word. And I'm not going to do that anymore. I hung up. The phone rang immediately. This time, it was Mom. "Please don't tell anyone outside, okay?" Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I know things have gone too far, but if you turn your back now, this family will really fall apart." I closed my eyes. Her image appeared in my mind. Hair carefully styled for the holidays. A face once gentle when I came home exhausted from work. But now, I only heard a familiar voice, trying to hold together a castle built on borrowed trust. "You call this falling apart?" I asked. "To me, it already collapsed a long time ago. You just didn't see it." My mother choked up. You can't You can't walk away like this. He's your brother. He's blood." When I transferred every penny of savings without question, when my signature was forged, when the apartment I bought was used as collateral, when Dad's illness was used to manipulate me one more time, who turned their back on whom? On the other end, my mother only breathed. No more excuses, no more calling my name like she always did. Then I heard the click of the call ending. I placed the phone on the table, exhaled shallowly, and felt, not freedom, but a kind of deep quiet, as if someone had just removed a rope from around my neck, only for me to realize I'd worn it for so long I had forgotten what freedom even felt like. I received the pale yellow envelope on a Tuesday afternoon, just as I left the office. The delivery person was a legal courier with a cold face. He said nothing, just handed me the envelope, stamped in bold. Notice of civil complaint, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I knew this day would come, but I never thought they'd go this far. I stood still on the steps of the building, opened the envelope. The familiar typeface of legal documents, but the content made my chest tighten. Accusations of financial fraud against the family, embezzlement of business support funds, emotional damage to my brother, James Monroe, refusal to repay family loans, and deliberate defamation of the family's reputation as revenge. Plaintiffs: Linda Monroe, Richard Monroe, James Monroe. The three names I once believed were the only home I had. I returned home, placed the file on the kitchen counter, poured a glass of water but didn't drink it. My throat felt like paper. I sat down, opened my laptop, pulled up my old contact list, and typed a name I never thought I'd need again. Victor Stone. Victor was my classmate in undergrad business law. While I was doing my MBA, he was completing his JD. The last time we spoke was at a seminar 3 years ago, where I sat next to him during a panel on financial ethics. Victor was now a financial attorney. And more than that, someone sharp enough to see through the moral theater of people who knew how to act like victims. The message I sent was simple. "Victor, I need help." 15 minutes later, he called. "What's going on, Natalie?" I told him everything in 10 minutes, leaving nothing out. From the $120,000 loan under my name, to the forged documents, and now the lawsuit, filed by my own family. "Meet me tonight, 7 o'clock. My downtown office." Victor's office was on the 11th floor, overlooking Copley Square. Small but neat and organized, just like him. Soft yellow light spilled over stacks of black-bound folders. A coffee machine sat in the corner, steam rising in thin waves like mist. I handed him the lawsuit. He read through it once, showed no visible emotion, then set it down and looked at me. "This is a pressure move. They want you to fold, to feel overwhelmed." I know. They're playing the emotional card first, painting you as the cold, wealthy sister who abandoned the family. But if you give me everything, I think I can do more than just fight back. I opened my bag and handed him a portable hard drive. All the messages, emails, bank statements, the voice recording from the night I went to the house, the forged loan documents, everything's in here. Victor plugged in the drive. While the files loaded, he pulled out another folder from his desk drawer. "I also started looking into Monroe Estates after your call. And I found this." I leaned over to look. It was a scanned copy of an internal share transfer agreement, in which James sold 12% of the company's shares to a third party. But the file was labeled as an internal transaction, with no change of ownership. Victor flipped to the next page. The buyer's signature is forged. The person listed is a 78-year-old man from Arkansas who hasn't left the state in 15 years. I swallowed hard. James forged documents again? Victor nodded. This document, combined with the forged signature using your name for a bank loan and the history of unreimbursed transfers, is enough for criminal prosecution. Not just James. Your father could also be charged as an accomplice. Certifying a forged document qualifies as aiding fraud. Victor poured more coffee, his voice lower. I know you want peace. But Natalie, if you don't push back, they won't stop. And this lawsuit, it's their final move to stay in control. If you don't stand up now, they'll keep painting you as the traitor to cover up what they did. I looked directly at Victor. We fight back. I want everything exposed. Victor nodded. I'll file a counterclaim tomorrow morning, and I need you to start writing your own statement. Your emotions, the details, even the things you tried to forget. The more honest you are, the stronger the case. I'll write it, tonight. Victor stood, his gaze warmer now. You're doing the right thing, Natalie. Some battles we don't choose. But once they show up at our door, we have to decide. Keep letting others define us, or finally protect what's left. The preliminary hearing took place on a Thursday morning. I wore a navy suit, my hair tied back neatly, my face barely made up, just enough to hold my composure. Victor stood beside me all morning, files clutched tightly in hand, his eyes never straying from the movement in the courtroom. He said, "We don't need to win emotionally. We just need the truth on record." My family sat on the opposite side. James wore a suit, but his shoulders were hunched. My mother wore a pale gray coat, her head bowed. My father still held his usual posture, back straight, eyes avoiding mine as I entered. Their lawyer spoke first with a long, winding speech that I had cut off communication suddenly and in a way that caused emotional harm, that I withheld previous support that had been part of an unspoken agreement, that I used my financial position to keep the family in fear and tarnish its image. Victor waited until they finished before rising, his tone calm but cold as steel. He presented each piece of evidence, bank statements, emails, the loan application under my name with the forged signature, the fraudulent share transfer agreement, even the audio recording I had saved. James's voice clearly saying, "She won't suspect a thing, just let Mom cry. She'll say yes." When Victor sat down, I saw James lower his head completely. My father stared hard at the table. My mother wouldn't look at me. She just clenched the hem of her coat like she was holding on to the last thing left. The judge didn't make a ruling that morning. The hearing was adjourned because the other side submitted a request to negotiate a settlement. That afternoon, I received an email from their attorney. The message was short. The Monroe family agrees to withdraw the lawsuit if Ms. Natalie Monroe agrees not to take the matter to public trial. They also pledged to restore her reputation through a written apology and a public statement clarifying any unfortunate misunderstandings. I read to the last line and wondered what they thought honor meant. Was it something you could return after it had already been used as a bargaining chip? Something you could patch with words after being the very people who tore it apart? I called Victor. He asked what I wanted. I replied simply, "No negotiation, no compromise. Not if it's just a strategy to lessen the penalty." I was hoping you'd say that. 2 days later, I received a handwritten envelope. Not through attorneys. Not by email. It was from my mother. The handwriting on the front was the same gentle script I remembered from childhood. The one she used to write notes on my lunchbox when I was 12. I opened it. Inside was a 3-page handwritten letter. She began with "Dear Natalie," and I thought, that word should have been saved for the days when it was still honest. The letter was a mix of remorse and rationalization that she didn't realize things had gone this far, that she never meant to hurt me, that James is your brother, weaker than you, the one I've always worried most about, that she was too afraid when she saw how firm you were and didn't know what to do but stay silent. And at the end, she wrote, "If you can, I hope you'll consider not taking this to court. Don't let your brother go to prison. He still has 2 young children. I know I was wrong. I'm sorry. Truly. That apology might have been sincere, but the sad truth was, I couldn't tell anymore. Because it came at the exact moment people like my mother always knew how to time, when the damage had already been done but the consequences hadn't fully landed. I just wrote back one single line. Honor isn't something you can return, because you never held it in the first place. I didn't send it. I just folded the page and placed it back in the same envelope, then tucked it into the bottom drawer, the one where I kept things that once mattered but were no longer whole enough to carry in my heart. I arrived in New Hampshire on a fall morning, when fog still hovered over the lake and the maple trees had started to shed their red leaves. The cabin I rented sat on a hillside, its back resting against the woods, its front facing a narrow valley where the morning sun poured down like golden syrup. No one was waiting for me there. No voice calling my name, no one asking, "Have you arrived yet?" And no one needing to know how long I'd stay. The little cabin had 2 bedrooms, a wooden kitchen, a fireplace, and a long table by the window, where I placed my laptop, a pot of hot tea, and the brown leather journal I'd brought from Boston. No cable TV, no traffic noise, only the wind moving through the trees and the faint tapping of woodpeckers on distant trunks. Sometimes I could hear deer stepping on the dry leaves behind the house. That silence didn't make me lonely. It felt like a return. Not to the past, but to myself. I didn't bring much, just a few warm clothes, books, and one single photo, the one of me at 28, holding a tray of almond cookies, standing in my parents' living room on Thanksgiving Day. I was smiling, not the kind you fake for a camera, but a real smile, one I no longer saw in myself. I framed the photo and placed it on the kitchen shelf. Every morning, while making coffee, I looked at it as a reminder of someone who once lived with an unguarded heart. I didn't hate the woman in that picture. I loved her, because she gave everything she had, including her last ounce of trust. The first few nights I wrote, not out of anger or revenge. I wrote to name the emotions I had buried: disappointment, exhaustion, helplessness, and that quiet shame of knowing I'd been used, and never daring to admit it. The first page of the journal held only one line. Family doesn't mean unconditional obligation, I wrote every day. At first, letters I'd never send. To my mother, to my father, to James. Then came monologues to myself, to the woman who once believed that carrying everyone's burden was the only way to make them stay. I didn't cry much. There were long silences between sentences, where my pen paused and I didn't even notice. A week later, I opened my laptop and started writing the first article. The title was simple: Setting Boundaries Doesn't Make You Bad, It Keeps You Whole. I didn't use my real name. I created an anonymous account on a platform focused on psychology and personal recovery. The piece didn't mention my family specifically, but it spoke clearly about the feeling of being drained by relationships labeled as blood ties, where love was offered only as long as you were useful. I didn't expect that in just 3 days, the post would reach thousands of readers. Comments poured in from everywhere. I was called selfish for refusing to pay off my brother's debt. My mom said siblings should sacrifice for each other, but she never asked what I had left after every sacrifice. Thank you for saying what I never had the courage to voice. I read every line, every shared story. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. These strangers from small corners across America, single mothers, eldest daughters, sisters holding entire families on their backs. They had all stood where I once stood, in that space where love and duty blur into a quiet kind of bondage. I began to write regularly, not as a writer, but as someone slowly untangling herself. Each article was a piece of the journey to reclaim boundaries that had once been erased. One time, I wrote about how giving is different from being taken for granted. Another, I wrote about standing in front of a bank screen, realizing that all the money I had given never bought me a single genuine hug. Gradually, I received invitations from anonymous support groups, online sessions for people leaving toxic family dynamics. I didn't accept right away, but I started recording my writings, sharing them on a podcast, one voice, one story, one breath at a time, as a way of sending a message out into the world. You are not the only one who walked away from a family you once loved more than yourself. The mornings in the woods were colder than I expected, but I got used to the mist soaking into my sleeves, to the crackle of firewood, and to a silence so deep I could hear my own heart exhale. No more midnight calls. No more questions about when the money's coming. No more thank yous that only disguised another favor. Only me. And the growing clarity that silence was no longer submission. It was the way I finally heard myself, after too many years of listening to everyone else. The news of James's sentence came on a mid-March afternoon, when the last snow still hadn't melted off the porch. I was brewing ginger tea when the phone rang. It was Victor. "The court just delivered the sentence," he said, his voice soft, as if he had prepared himself for this moment. 24 months in federal prison, charges financial fraud, forged signatures, and money laundering. No probation. I didn't speak for a few seconds. I simply placed my hand on the table, quietly watching the window, where sunlight filtered through bare branches. "Was my family in court?" I asked. "Just your mother," Victor replied. "Your father didn't show. Maybe out of shame?" I nodded slightly, even though Victor couldn't see. "Thank you," I said, then ended the call. I didn't feel joy, no satisfaction, no victory. What I felt as I heard the sentence wasn't revenge, it was closure, a necessary ending for something that had dragged on far too long. 2 weeks later, I received a small package. No return name. The address was written in careful, uneven handwriting, like someone still learning to write. Probably a child. The handwriting made me pause. My fingers slowly tore through the outer wrapping. Inside was a folded letter, on lined paper, written in pale purple ink, and a crayon drawing of a small wooden house with smoke curling up from the chimney. Below the drawing was a single sentence. "Dear Miss Natalie, my name is Ellie. My dad said you were the smartest in the family. You used to bake really good almond cookies. I've never had them, but I want to meet you. Is that okay?" I sat still for a long time. Ellie. James's daughter, born the year I moved back to Boston, when his company had its first big success. I'd once given her a tiny silver bracelet for her first birthday, engraved with her name, the only gift I ever sent without knowing whether it actually reached her hands. I flipped the letter over. There was one more line, written in more practiced, hesitant handwriting. Clearly from an adult. "If you're not comfortable, we understand. But my dad said, you were someone who used to believe in good things, even when others didn't deserve it." I folded the letter, my hands still trembling. I didn't know why James had written those words. Remorse, manipulation, or one final truth. But I didn't linger on his sentence. I lingered on Ellie. A child. A new door that carried no guilt from the grown-ups. I didn't reply right away. I placed the letter on my writing desk by the window, where the morning sun shone brightest. For days after that, I didn't touch it. But on Saturday morning, as I opened the window and let the breeze flow through the house, I gently brushed my fingers against the edge of the letter and left it there, untouched. I began to remember the night Ellie was born, when James called just to brag. She has dimples like Mom. I was on a business trip then, sitting in the lobby of a hotel in Chicago, holding a cup of cold coffee, smiling, thinking our family had turned a new page. I remembered the first time I saw Ellie, when she had just begun to walk, with eyes the color of early New England fog. I didn't know if she remembered me or only heard about me in scattered stories. But strangely, that tiny letter alone was enough to make my heart stir. a feeling I had spent years suppressing to protect myself. I didn't know whether I'd meet Ellie. But I did know this. Inside a child's simple question, there was something no courtroom, no apology, no ledger could offer. The chance to see what I thought I had lost. Trust, not in my old family, but in myself. That I could love again, but this time, not through sacrifice. I brewed a fresh pot of tea, opened the window. Cool wind swept through my sleeves, carrying the scent of damp wood and dry leaves. The light tilted onto the desk, landing right on the folded letter. I looked at it, for the first time, not with hesitation, but with a quiet, genuine smile. Not because everything had been fixed, but because I knew I had turned the page to a chapter where love no longer meant abandoning myself. What would you do if one day the people you loved most were the ones who taught you to build boundaries? I'm not sharing this story to accuse anyone. I'm sharing it because I know there are so many people out there, maybe even you, living inside something called family, but silently struggling just to survive it. Have you ever been like me, believing that if you gave enough, they'd finally learn to value you? If so, I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes, one word from you could be enough to make someone else feel a little less alone on their journey back to themselves. And if you'd like to keep listening to true stories about family, boundaries, and growing stronger after hurt, hit follow. Because behind every door that closes, there's always another one waiting to be opened. With your own hands,